Hey guys, how's it going? So UFC 319 just wrapped up and I'm going to run through the whole card and give you guys a breakdown of everything that happened this event. So let's just get straight into it. And opening up the card, we had Alibi Idiris versus Joseph Morales. So I went with Alibi Idiris by a decision win. I saw it being a somewhat competitive fight, but I thought Idiris' wrestling was going to carry him through to a decision win here, with Morales having his moments but not really being able to deal with the grappling. I was actually really wrong with this one. Joseph Morales won this one. Very dominant win for him here. Second round submission, which was surprising. So in the first round, both fighters came out quick in the striking, with Morales pushing Idiris back more, landing the better shots, and they quickly move to the cage where they enter a cage clinch where they're sort of fighting for cage control the whole sort of half of the round. Roughly even. Morales did look a little bit better there, and when they get back to striking halfway through the round, Morales quickly gets a takedown and from there takes top control, eventually transitioning to the back and closing out the round with this rear naked choke that was in really tight. Had Alibi in a lot of trouble. Ultimately the bell goes off, sort of saves Alibi even though he's throwing up a thumbs up. You could tell it was in deep. And in the second round, both fighters just start throwing a bunch of spinning attacks. They aren't landing at all. In fact, Morales is just keeping it simple with his boxing, landing the better shots and pushing Idiris back just through being more technical and not throwing these crazy spin attacks. And when Morales hurts Idiris bad with a series of body shots, he uses that opportunity to drop Alibi, quickly takes it back, to which he maneuvers onto bottom position and quickly sneaks in this triangle choke. Alibi taps in the second round. Morales becomes a tough 33 winner. Really impressive win from Morales. Being able to out-grapple Alibi is very difficult, and he made it look kind of easy in this fight. So I'm excited to see what's next for him within the flyweight division, and we'll move on to the next fight. Following on from that, we had Karine Silva versus Dione Barboza. So I went Karine Silva by decision win. Mainly it was just because Barboza was filling in late minute, and I saw Karine Silva as a more well-rounded fighter. I was actually correct with this one, although it was a very close decision. Karine Silva did take it though, but you could make an argument for Barboza. So in the first round, very slow, low-volume battle on the feet, with the striking being pretty tit for tat. Barboza mixing up her shot selection a bit more and landing the bigger shots occasionally. And in the closing minutes, Barboza picks up and slams Silva down onto the ground, where she starts threatening a rear naked choke, followed by an armbar, but the bell goes off before she can fully lock it in, but she definitely takes the round there. Second round starts, and Silva is landing the bigger shots early on, catching a kick from Barboza and using it to take her down to the ground, for which a large part of the round is Silva holding either top position or back control, and the rest of the fight spent with Barboza in top control after Silva sort of gets taken down. But Silva just keeps landing elbows from bottom, as well as threatening this triangle choke over and over again, with the round being a super close one, but I still have it going to Silva, primarily just through more damage and constantly threatening that triangle, while Barboza didn't really do much. Third round, fairly even on the feet to start the round. Silva slowly begins to land bigger shots as the round went on. Midway through the round though, Silva puts herself on bottom position before reversing position, locking up a super tight guillotine that probably could have submitted Barboza if it was in any tighter. But Barboza managed to pull her head out, and for some reason Silva puts herself back onto bottom position for the rest of the round, landing some good damage from there, but once again making it another really close round where it was pretty much damage versus control time in the scoring. And when the scorecards read, Silva takes a 29-28 decision. Super close fight. Could have really gone either way for me. But I do think Silva was consistently landing the more damage. Just wasn't controlling the fight on the ground as much. But still, not the most fun fight on the card. But it wasn't anything horrific. Yeah, next fight. Next up on the card was Edson Barboza versus Drakkar Klose. So I had that Edson Barboza was going to take this one by a decision win. It was a super close fight. Went to a somewhat close decision, even though it was unanimous. But Drakkar Klose ended up taking it 29-28. Very close though, and I actually thought Barboza was winning leading to the decision, but we'll break it down. Round one, early on Barboza starts landing good, both with some leg kicks as well as the occasional shot over the top that would land clean, sort of stumble but close back a bit. But early-ish in the round, Klose puts Barboza up against the cage for where they sort of flip-flop between who's controlling against the cage. It was roughly even, not really much of substance there. And in the final minute and a half when striking, Barboza does land a lot better, but occasionally he would get clipped with a big shot. But I still think he won this first round just by constantly peppering those shots in. Getting hit quite big, but still out-voluming, cage control as well. Yeah, second round, Klose starts picking it up and starts kind of pushing up on Barboza early, having him hurt against the cage a few times before entering the clinch and landing a few knees, but not really much else. And from there, the fight would just go back and forth between a striking battle where Klose was landing the bigger shots and hurting Barboza pretty badly at points, and a cage clinch where Klose would rack up a lot of control time. Ultimately, Klose won this one a lot more dominantly. And in the third round, the first half of the round was spent with Barboza holding close against the cage and nothing else really. He took about half the round in control time, but when the fight returns to the center of the octagon halfway through the round, Barboza starts to land a lot more volume, leg kicks especially, that had Klose's front legs kind of hurt. Klose was once again landing the bigger shots, but Barboza was constantly just landing, and honestly probably took the fight based off the volume combined with that control time at the start. And it goes to a decision. Klose takes it 29-28. Super close fight that had some really messy scoring, but honestly, I had it 29-28 Barboza. I'm not going to scream robbery at this one. I mean, I could see how Klose could have won this, but super close fight. Wasn't the most fun fight. There was a lot of cage clinching, not much striking, but still not the worst fight ever. Next fight on the card. Next up on the card was Chase Hooper versus Alexander Hernandez. So I went with Chase Hooper for this one. I said by a round 1 submission. I just thought the minute the fight would go to the ground, it would definitely be Hooper's dominant fight. And I couldn't really see it standing that much. And even if it did stay standing, I thought Hooper's striking was decent. I was actually wrong with this one. Alexander Hernandez took this one. Very, very dominant first round knockout as well at that. So the first round opens up and the fight stays standing for pretty much the whole round. Hernandez initially is struggling with the range of Hooper. Hooper's landing at distance with these long rangy shots. But as the round went on, Hernandez started blitzing in, finding that distance, landing these 1-2 shots that were pretty big and were sort of knocking Hooper's head back. Before jumping back out of range, before Hooper could really get anything off, and he was dealing some really big damage with these sort of blitzing combos. Hooper keeps trying for takedowns later in the round, consistently getting denied or being sort of forced back into the cage. But either way, he's stuck staying on the feet, trying to strike with Hernandez, who is a lot faster, nicer footwork, landing the bigger shots. And with 10 seconds left, Hernandez lands this big straight right that drops Hooper badly, has him sort of falling forwards, where Hernandez lands these 3 or 4 big shots to the side of the head before pushing Hooper over. They did stop the fight a little early, in my opinion. There was only 2 seconds left in the round. You probably could have seen it through. Would Hooper have come back from there? Probably not, but still, it was a little early. But either way, a good win for Hernandez. Nasty knockdown followed by that ground and pound for a first round finish. Probably one of the best in his career. Yeah, pretty good fight this one. Next fight on the card. Next up on the card was Jessica Andrade versus Loopy Godinez. So I went with Loopy Godinez by decision here. I thought it was going to be very, very close, but I saw Loopy Godinez being able to mix it up on the ground to take this one by decision win. And I got this one correct. Loopy Godinez took this one, decision win. There was actually very little takedowns or ground or wrestling game. Where it was a pretty scrappy brawl overall, just in general. So the first round opens up, stay on the feet the whole round. Godinez looked a lot better in the striking of the two. She was just consistently landing these hard shots on Andrade, as well as mixing in knees to the body, sort of mixing up her shot selection a bit more than Andrade. And while Andrade was landing big here and there, did some real damage to the face of Godinez early, it was very, very occasional, with Godinez really being the only one throwing volume this round, doing some big damage as well of her own, and honestly just taking the round through her volume. Second round opens up, and early in the round, Godinez gets Andrade to the ground, where she keeps threatening a triangle choke from top position before securing the back and taking up half that round in control time. And they get back to the feet, where Godinez just looks sharper of the striker, similar to the first round, just landing more often, doing some really big damage with her shots as well, that sort of dazed Andrade. A left hook specifically in that second round is what I remember as being like the biggest impact shot in that round. And while later in the round Andrade does start landing big again, it was Godinez's consistency throughout this round and her control time that likely won her the second as well. And in the third, Andrade comes out really aggressive on the feet off the bat. She starts swinging heavy, consistently pushing forward on Godinez, who is a lot more defensive this round, sort of backing up and holding up a high guard against the cage. And while Godinez is constantly firing back, similar to the previous rounds, with some pretty heavy counters as well in this round, Andrade does some massive damage to the face of Godinez, landing a lot less often, but just landing harder, doing some big damage to the nose, especially Godinez, and actually had her pretty hurt in a few times in this round, but ultimately it goes to the decision. It goes to the Godinez 29-28 decision win. A very scrappy brawl. This was actually one of the more fun fights on the card because they were both sort of putting it all on the table, especially in the striking this fight. But yeah, this one was good. Godinez, good win for her. She's going to be making her way up in the rankings. Might even fight for a title sometime soon, maybe. But yeah, fun fight. Following that, we had Gerald Meerschaert versus Michal Oleksiejczuk. So I had Michal Oleksiejczuk for this one. I said by round 2 KO. I just thought his striking has much improved since training with the fighting nerds. And while Meerschaert is tricky, I thought that on the feet it would be sort of day and night, with the takedowns really being Meerschaert's only chance. And I got this one correct, except I got it wrong with the round. Michael Oleksiejczuk won this one. It was actually a first round KO. Very, very impressive one at that. So the first round opens up, and early on, Michal keeps trying to take Oleksiejczuk down. Oleksiejczuk's doing a good job, though, at sprawling these takedowns and forcing Meerschaert to sort of shoot in from range, giving him a lot of time to keep the fight standing by sprawling. And on the feet, Oleksiejczuk's just landing these really big shots over and over again, backing Meerschaert up against the cage where he's dazing him badly. And midway through the round, Oleksiejczuk lands a left hand that has Meerschaert hurt badly. He falls over, pulls guard on the ground, but Oleksiejczuk doesn't dive in. He instead backs up, lets the fight get back to the feet. And then shortly after, he hits this combo that finishes with an uppercut. That dropped Meerschaert bad. Oleksiejczuk dove in, finished Gerald Meerschaert with some really big ground and pound to end that fight in the first round. And the combo he put him away with looked so slick. It was like a left hand, right hand, uppercut, left hand over the top. It was this nice four-piece, put him down. His striking has looked so much improved since training with the Fighting Nerds. And I'm actually really excited to see what's in his future, because I could see him breaking into the top 15 with maybe 2 more fights under his belt. But good win for Oleksiejczuk there. Meerschaert didn't really look great. He never really had a moment to get the grappling off, and therefore just kind of got beat up on the feet the whole time. But I think it speaks more to how good Oleksiejczuk is nowadays. So another really good fight, another fun finish, and we'll move on to the final fight on the prelims. And closing out the prelims, we had Baysangur Chimaev versus Eric Nolan. So I said that Chimaev was going to take this one by a first round KO. I just thought his Contender Series performance was incredibly dominant, one of the more dominant ones we've seen in a while, and I thought his record spoke for itself. 9-0, undefeated, lots of finishes in there. Eric Nolan's decent, but I didn't really see him being able to compete with someone as dominant and someone who has such a heavy training experience, training with Khamzat. And being, you know, one of the better training partners of Khamzat. I didn't think Eric Nolan would be able to keep up with that. And I got this one correct. Chimaev won this one. It was actually a later finish than I expected and a lot closer of a fight than I expected. Second round KO for him though. So in the first round, opens up and early on, Chimaev is just constantly pushing forward, pushing Nolan back up against the cage at multiple points, but he's not really throwing anything. He's sort of walking forward, asserting his dominance, but Nolan would every now and then land this massive shot from sort of a counter shot or bouncing back against the cage would land on Chimaev, push him back a bit, and Nolan was really the only one landing in this first round. Midway through the round, Chimaev does take Nolan down, controls him for a large part of the round, constantly take him down over and over every time Nolan would try and get back up to the feet and trying to threaten these submissions, but it doesn't really work. And in the final minute, it's Nolan who's just landing more on Chimaev. Chimaev's just walking forward, high guarding up, smiling, sort of emoting a little bit. But in the closing seconds, Nolan catches Chimaev and has him potentially really hurt. He's wobbling around on really shaky legs, backing up into the cage. It could have been playing possum. It did sort of look like what Derek Lewis does regularly, but I don't really know. It was sort of a 50-50 whether it actually hurt him or not. With him taunting as well, it did seriously look like he was faking it. But up against the cage, Nolan just starts nailing him with shots, not only to the head, but also kneeing to the body. Just really trying to get as much damage off as possible before the round closed, but couldn't put him away. Round closes, and in the second round, early in the round, Nolan just starts tagging Chimaev heavy again. But midway through the round, he gets hit with this massive leg kick, to which he squats down, grabs his leg and screams, which initially I thought that it was a fake out, sort of similar to Derek Lewis once again. But apparently it was real. Like, apparently this really hurt him. He managed to snap back into the fight, but it was too late because Chimaev used that to take him to the ground. And on the ground, Chimaev keeps transitioning between threatening an arm triangle from top position and then taking the back and trying to lock in a rear naked choke, with him eventually beating up on Nolan against the cage and from the back securing a rear naked choke that he locked in very, very tight. Submitted Nolan in the second round. Good win for him here. He did look kind of bad in that first round, not really throwing anything, getting beat up, but I think he knew that he wasn't going to be finished. He does have a really good chin. And man, Nolan looked really good here. Whether it was intentional or not, Chimaev made Nolan look very, very good. He did have him hurt, potentially. He was landing the better shots, and even in the grappling, he was keeping it competitive. I'm excited to see what's next for both of these fighters, and this was a pretty fun fight. Definitely not one of the highlights, but still a good fight on the card, and we'll move on to the main. And to start off the main card, we had Tim Elliott versus Kai Asakura. So I went with Kai Asakura for this one. I said a round 2 knockout. I really thought he was going to be the better striker. I thought that Pantoja loss didn't really speak that well to what he's capable of, considering it's Pantoja. And I just thought Elliott did have a few holes in his game, especially when it came to the striking. I got this one wrong. Tim Elliott took this one. Second round submission. It was actually kind of a comeback win because Asakura was winning up until the finish. But breaking it down, round 1, from the jump, Tim Elliott's just constantly throwing weird kicks. These flashy shots, spin kicks. Just really flying knees, just anything that would look good, but none of them are landing. He's constantly switching stances as well. Throughout this fight, he was sort of doing a Dominic Cruz impression, except not really using it to strike. While Asakura is just closing distance and sticking Elliott with the same straight over and over again. Elliott was trying to sort of make it elusive and hard to find the range, but very early on, Asakura is just sending these shots down the middle that are tagging directly with the face of Elliott. And while Elliott did land occasionally here and there, he was too busy throwing these crazy unorthodox shots that weren't finding their target. Meanwhile, Asakura was the only one really causing any form of damage this round. Landing these nice kicks to the body and legs, and then just peppering this straight and jab over and over again to the face of Elliott, and most likely just took that first round through volume, but there wasn't really much of offering in that first. And in the second round, it was looking like it would just be a repeat of the first. Elliott throwing these wild kicks and punches, but rarely ever connecting with Asakura, while Asakura is just keeping it basic and technical, with his approach being the only way that he's landing big. But when Asakura overreaches on a shot late in the round, Elliott uses that chance to take him down. And Asakura just kind of puts his head into a guillotine. He landed in a very unfortunate spot. Let Elliott snatch up this guillotine that he fights for a decently long time, to be fair to him. Asakura really almost made it to the end of the round just by constantly fighting this guillotine choke. But eventually he's forced to tap. It looked like he was going to go out. And Elliott takes a second round submission comeback win. It was a good win. He didn't look amazing leading up to it. Asakura didn't really look amazing either. He was just landing a bit more. One of the more dull fights on the card, but still a decent fight, and we'll move on to the next one. Next up, we had Jared Cannonier versus Michael Venom Page. So I went Michael Venom Page for this one by a decision win. I couldn't see him getting a knockout, but I thought he'd just take this fight through, being a bit more elusive on the feet, keeping it rangy in his traditional karate style. Meanwhile, Cannonier is very sort of traditional in his striking approach. He just walks forward, doesn't really have much longitudinal movements from side to side, and I didn't really see him mixing in takedowns and wrestling, which ultimately I thought would lead to a win for Michael Venom Page, and I got this one correct. MVP took this one, decision win. Good win. There were some moments though that looked really bad for him, and we'll get into that, particularly the third round. So the first round opens up, and throughout the fight, Cannonier was seriously struggling with the range of MVP this fight, walking forward with his guard up, only to get tagged with this straight or a looping shot around the side, and MVP would just circle to his side every time Cannonier would finally close distance and try and land something. And while Cannonier did rack up some control time against the fence this round, it was MVP dropping Cannonier that ultimately won him the round. Granted, it wasn't a bad drop. Like, when you think of knockdowns, you think of someone being dazed, hurt on the ground. This was an MVP knockdown where he landed these two somewhat heavy shots and then followed up with this push with his fists or bumped him with his body that would send him off balance and knock him to the ground. But it wasn't really a damaging knockdown as much as it was just sort of a break in the action. But still, either way, MVP was really the only one landing shots in this first round, so he definitely takes the first. Second round, similar to the last round, but this round Cannonier's rushing in a lot more. He's blitzing in, but to his sort of dismay, MVP would just circle out, and Cannonier would just go headfirst into the cage with this blitzing combo. And while MVP did knock Cannonier down again this round technically, this one was just way more blatantly a push. He used his fist to sort of push Cannonier backwards, and Cannonier just sort of rolled and stood back up again instantly. Despite that, Cannonier barely looked any better this round. He wasn't landing much more, and MVP was just still keeping it rangy, landing his shots at distance, being the only one really landing. And throughout this fight as well, he kept emoting on Cannonier, which didn't really help him scorecard-wise, but it just looked really, really bad. Third round opens up, and it was starting to look like it was going to be a 30-27 for MVP, similar to the last 2 rounds. But Cannonier catches a kick from MVP very early in the round and uses it to trip MVP, gets him on the ground, and jumps on top position to where he pretty much just holds dominant positioning for the whole round. He does land some pretty big ground and pound here and there. In fact, his ground and pound was doing quite a bit of damage, especially later on when he'd start nailing shots directly to the side of the head of MVP, and when he'd start trying to sort of threaten these submissions as well. It did look really bad for MVP, particularly Kimura that he got really close to locking in, but doesn't manage to get it. The bell goes off, third round finishes, and it goes to a decision. MVP takes it 29-28. Really flashy performance, one of the better ones when it comes to sort of his taunting and his style that we're used to seeing. Cannonier didn't look amazing here, but once again, MVP in that third round, really concerning. Seeing how sort of unable he is to defend against any wrestling, and once it does get to the ground, he really struggles to deal with his opponent getting top position. Still a very fun fight. I mean, I would be lying if I said I wasn't really excited throughout this whole fight, but yeah, good fight. A little concerning from both sides, but still entertaining, and we'll move on to the next fight. Up next was Geoff Neal versus Carlos Prates. So I said that Carlos Prates was going to pull this one off by a second round KO. I knew this one was going to end in a finish, and if it stayed on the feet, which I think it was, Neal doesn't usually push for takedowns that heavily. I thought Prates was going to be able to sort of let his signature style fly, and he wouldn't find a finish at some point. I did think that Neal did have a pretty good chin, hence why I went for a second round KO. I didn't think it was going to be an easy fight for Prates to win. But I got this one correct. Carlos Prates took this one, round 1 KO as well, which, I mean, pretty much both fighters promised. They said that it was going to end early and someone was going to be finished, and I guess that's what happened. So, good win there. First round opens up, and the fight starts with both fighters trying to feel each other out. They're staying at distance. Neal's actually the one who starts pushing in earlier and landing these big shots over the top on Prates that are sort of backing him up, wobbling a bit to the side, but nothing really that fight altering, I guess. But as the round goes on, Prates just starts landing more and more. He's mixing up his shots as well. And when he get Neal up against the cage, he start battering with the sort of elbows, his knees. Very Muay Thai heavy approach, which is his main style, really. He does have some concerning moments, though. He's circling around on the back foot a lot in this fight, and whenever he'd sort of back up to the cage, he would trip over a little bit, or he'd turn his back, start running, and get tagged with a shot. There were points where Neal was hitting Prates hard every time he'd be circling around on the back foot, sort of halt the momentum. But as the fight went on, Prates' head movement especially, he started to sort of feel the fight out, get a flow going. His head movement was really good, especially leading up to the finish, where Neal would be throwing these 2-3-piece combos, and Prates would be using his footwork and head work to sort of avoid anything without tiring his arms out by holding up a guard. And at the end of the round, both fighters meet sort of in the middle, try and throw to finish the fight. And with a couple of seconds left, Prates lands this massive spinning elbow. 2 seconds left in the fight, drops Neal badly, has him finished. First guy in UFC history, I think, to knock out Geoff Neal, which is very impressive. And this was a vintage Prates performance. He took a performance bonus. He's said he's going to have a short turnaround fight in Rio, which I'm very excited for. He could really get his name back in that top sort of 5 area, given a few more sort of fights, and I think he's back. Neal didn't look bad either. Neal had moments where he sort of tagged Prates. Never really had him hurt, but still a decent performance from Neal. But man, Prates is back, and I'm very excited to see what's next for him. Next fight on the card. And now on to the co-main event, Lerone Murphy versus Aaron Pico. So for this one, I went with Lerone Murphy by a decision win. Aaron Pico is very dangerous on the feet. He is very explosive, and he does have some decent grappling. But outside of that, he does leave himself open to be tagged with shots. And outside of his moments of power and explosivity, he isn't the strongest striker, especially when compared to someone like Lerone Murphy, who is constantly just applying pressure, applying volume. A very heavy volume fighter who takes it to a lot of decisions where he slowly sort of breaks fighters down as the fight goes on. And I thought that was what was going to happen here. I got this one correct. Lerone Murphy did win this one. It was actually by a first round KO, a very nasty one as well. One of the best performances of his whole career here. And I think this further solidifies his name as a featherweight Leon Edwards. Someone who goes to a lot of decisions and then sort of has the occasional knockout that puts his name into that title contention. And this was a really, really good fight. So the first round opens up, and early on, Pico lands a shot that gets a sort of delayed reaction out of Murphy. It doesn't really hurt him that bad. It buckles his knees a little bit, backs him up against the cage, but doesn't have him falling over or really wilting. But Pico follows in against the cage. He lands some really big shots and then follows it up by trying to take Murphy down. Actually manages to get Murphy down for a short bit, but Murphy does a good job at scrambling back to the feet and enters a clinch with Pico where he starts hurting Pico back. Landing this elbow in particular that really hurt Pico. Had him shooting him for a sort of panic takedown. But Pico is also hurting Murphy. He's ripping these massive body shots. One in particular where he sort of winds up from the side. Lands it directly to the liver side of Murphy. Folds Murphy over a little bit. And when they separate, Pico rushes in to land this combo on Murphy. And Murphy times his spinning elbow perfectly. That lands cleanly on the temple of Pico. Has him out cold. It was actually really well timed with Pico sort of blitzing into the left side while Murphy was spinning around, throwing the elbow sort of directly towards his head. And Murphy takes a really scary first round KO against Pico, who was out for a really concerning amount of time. You could tell that this one really shut the lights off badly. Murphy's undefeated record continues. I think his next fight will be a big one. Not to spoil too much on my Who's Next video, but probably a title shot if I'm guessing, but we'll see. But man, yeah, Murphy looked amazing here. Pico didn't even look that bad either. He got caught. It is what it is. He had moments where he did have Murphy not hurt per se, but in a bit of trouble. And I do think he will sort of make his way back up into these featherweight rankings, but I think he definitely needs to go back to these bottom 15 opponents and make a resume for himself in the UFC. But this was a very fun fight. Another spinning elbow knockout, 2 in a row. Really explosive main card this event. And we'll move on to the main event. And now the main event, Dricus du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev for the middleweight championship of the world. I went with Khamzat Chimaev by decision win. I got this one 100% correct. Khamzat Chimaev took this one, decision win. A lot of people were saying submission Khamzat. A lot of people were saying Dricus was going to pick it up in the later rounds and possibly find a finish. And I kind of agreed leading up to the fight. How I saw it, Khamzat would have the first 2 rounds in the wrestling. Dricus maybe having a better second round, but still losing in the wrestling. And then in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, Dricus would pick it up with Khamzat having one of those rounds where he just does a little bit more control time-wise and takes a decision. But I did see it being very, very close. It was a lot more dominant than I thought it could have been. I don't know whether it was more because of Dricus' wrestling not being that great or Khamzat being an absolute animal when it comes to the sort of takedowns, holding people down, his physicality. Very little damage, but we'll get into that. So the first round opens up, and to start it off, it was a super intense atmosphere in the stare-off. They're both looking at each other across the octagon. They meet in the middle during the fighter announcements, and I'd have to be held back. The stare-off when they're against the cage looking at each other was absolutely electric. The atmosphere surrounding that was insane. And instantly Chimaev takes DDP down, and DDP catches Chimaev in the guillotine early in this first round. That looked very concerning for a second. Chimaev manages to pull his head out, but it does look good for Dricus early on with that sort of early catching him in a guillotine. Looked like Dricus was sort of switched on for this one. But from there, Chimaev quickly locked in a crucifix position, pins down the arm of DDP between his legs. And while Chimaev is landing constantly, he's not landing anything really significant. DDP's pushing his head into Chimaev's chest, restricting the amount of power Chimaev can get into these small shots. And Chimaev isn't really trying to posture up to land big. He's content with just sitting in crucifix position, landing these little tippy-tap shots. Meanwhile, DDP is sort of waiting the round out. And Chimaev wins the round through taking pretty much the whole round in control time. 10-8 is arguable. He didn't do really any damage on the ground. Never really threatened DDP with a submission this round. But definite Chimaev round. Second round opens up and Chimaev takes DDP down again almost instantly and holds it back, where DDP was trying to fight to get back up for the rest of the round. Against the cage, he was nailing DDP with his knees to the legs and thigh and to the liver occasionally, with the shots not really doing too much. A bit more damage, but it was a pretty low volume round. Chimaev likely took it on control time. Once again, I don't even know if you could score it a 10-8 here. He did have him a bit more hurt, and he did control pretty much the whole round, but still, he didn't really threaten a submission at any point during this round. Didn't land anything huge, so I had it 20-18 going into the third. Third round, same as the first. Khamzat puts DDP in a crucifix position early in this round. This round, Chimaev starts landing a lot bigger, though. He starts landing harder from that crucifix position, especially with some elbows. But to DDP's credit, this round he was sort of fighting back a bit. He started making his way back up to the feet constantly, trying to break this body lock of Chimaev. But every time Chimaev would get that body lock, he'd just yank DDP back down to the ground. Very stubborn approach from Chimaev, not even letting DDP try and break that body lock before he'd get him down again. And Chimaev took another round just through control time. Lots of volume, no real significant strikes though. Fourth round, stayed standing for a little bit. DDP was landing big, especially a big knee to the head of Chimaev when he dived in for a takedown. That had him decently hurt, but Chimaev very quickly gets the fight to the ground, and he just holds the back of DDP, knees to the legs, knees to the liver, similar to the second round. The ref actually separates this sort of position with a minute left in the round. Bit late in my opinion to sort of really do anything. Dricus tries to have a moment on the feet but can't get anything fight ending off, and ultimately Chimaev takes another round. And then we move into the fifth, where it was just another round. Chimaev taking DDP down, constantly holding him on bottom position with a body lock. This is a closer round. There was a moment at the end of the fight where DDP reverses position, takes it back, threatens a face crank that got scarily close to being locked in. I actually thought DDP would somehow pull off this amazing reverse victory. But he couldn't finish the fight. It goes to a decision. Chimaev takes a 50-44 in one of the most one-way showings in a championship fight. Very, very dominant from Chimaev. I'm actually worried for the rest of the middleweight division because after that performance, I don't know who beat Chimaev. Imavov, I don't think. Bahari, I don't think. Fluffy stands a good chance, but even still, like, Chimaev looked absolutely in control against a guy that was arguably going to be one of the middleweight greats if he won this. And while it was really dominant, not much damage. DDP actually landed probably better damage this fight, but Chimaev controlled him the whole fight. Wasn't the most fun either to watch. It was a lot of just holding there. I think the ref should have separated it at points, but yet again, DDP was constantly trying to progress, get back to the feet, so I can see why he wouldn't want to separate it. But if DDP just sat there and took these little tippy-tap shots from crucifix position, I'm sure they actually probably would have separated a bit more, which probably didn't work in his favour here. So, yeah, good win for Chimaev. Very dominant championship reign I see from him. I don't know how often it'll turn around with his health scares. And I think DDP will be back. I think he needs to maybe get 1 or 2 more wins and get himself back in that title contention. But yeah, he didn't look amazing this fight. So that's it, guys. That's UFC 319 and a breakdown of everything that happened this event. How did we do this card? We did decent. 67% of our predictions on who would win we got correct, and of that we got the method by 75%. Cam actually tied it up with us this week. 67% of his fight predictions were correct. Good week for both of us. Where would I rank this card? You know, it's a mixed card. The main event wasn't the funnest we've ever seen. It was complete domination. I don't think we'll see anything like that in a while. Wasn't that fun to watch though. There were some lowlights. Karine Silva versus Dione Barboza. Even Edson Barboza's fight wasn't as exciting as I thought it would be. But there were just consistently good performances this card. Very stacked as well. The main card was one of the better main cards we've gotten in a while. And even the main event as a super fight was really intriguing to watch in for. So I'm going to put this one in the middle of A tier. I'm going to put it below 315 and above 313. Just in that middle spot there. It was one of the better events we got this year. Just before I go into a recap of the event, I do have a Verdict Fight League. If you want to join that and contribute your picks and predictions and see where they rank up against me and Cam's, please consider joining that. It would be really cool to get a few people in there and have a competition going. And yeah, this was a really solid event. Next week, kind of an average fight night, Walker versus Zhang Ming Yang. It's alright. This was a very good card though, and I feel like next week won't live up to it, but we'll see. Prediction video for that coming out soon, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.